I wanted to begin to talk about the importance of nutrition for general health and for competition in CrossFit. For the general public, the average person can follow pretty much any health guidelines so long as they are within the healthy ranges. For the competitor, person-by-person goals, statures, and fitness level are taken into consideration when calculating proper nutrition. Nutrition is arguably the most important factor to one's health, even more important than exercise. Without nutrition, all of the exercise one participates in is essentially nullified. In CrossFit, exercise and nutrition are made to be one. Without one or the other, the whole cannot work. And in basic training, nutrition is statistically timed to optimize training. Depending on the person's goals, we typically tell the athletes to tell us what exactly they want. So, for instance, for me, I am trying to gain weight, so the number of sheer calories that I eat are more important than the quality of calories. Whereas if a person is trying to maintain weight, then they are trying to maintain the amount of calories per day while hitting the macronutrients, so carbohydrates, proteins, and fats for their day. And then when a person is trying to lose weight, they are on a caloric deficit, which is something similar to the person who's trying to gain weight, but in the opposite effect. So their macronutrients are still calculated, but when they eat and how much they eat is controlled so that they can lose weight properly. And then in competition, pre-competition, during competition, and post-competition, fueling are important to optimize performance. So depending on the quantity of competition for the CrossFit athlete, specifically timed eating periods are then put into place depending on the event. So if you have a morning event, typically you probably want to eat breakfast a couple hours before the competition, and then after each event, not a full meal, but definitely a snack to replenish the calories, because CrossFit competitors are trying to replenish the calories versus trying to eat a particular amount of macronutrients. There are many different ideologies to perfecting these time frames. However, it is not an exact science, and ultimately it comes down to the athlete themselves. A lot of it is trial and error, and one thing might work for one person, but one thing definitely might not work for the other. So it's definitely a person-by-person case, and they just have to try it out. Helms writes an article called Evidence-Based Recommendations for Natural Bodybuilding, Contest Preparation, Nutrition, and Supplementation that describes the competition aspects of nutrition. CrossFit athletes take a lot of the nutritional wisdom from endurance athletes because they similarly compete in long-duration events. Typical CrossFit competitions last from anywhere from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. depending on the sheer number of workouts. So the time frames of eating are similar to that of an endurance athlete, and the way that they eat is also similar. The focus of nutrition for both types of athletes is muscle storing carbohydrates, enough to fuel the body for over a 2-hour span. Helms states that a CrossFitter's carbohydrate intake should be an additional serving for breakfast and lunch. So we call this carb loading in CrossFit. That's our kind of term or phrase that we coined. That is for the night before, is that to load the body with carbs so that the energy storage in the muscles of carbohydrate energy storage is maximized for the glycogen stores. That way, during competition, they were not dehydrated from our carbohydrates, and that we can continue to compete at a high level, at a high intensity over that 2-hour or so span. Now, the 2-hour or so span is different for everybody. Everybody's eats differently and expels energy differently. So that 2-hour window may be shorter, may be longer, depending on the athlete. That's also why we tend to do a trial and error with our eating in time frames. The dinner's carbohydrates will not process for about 18 hours, so we want to carb load prior to the event so that they can be maximized when the time comes for energy expenditure. For a competition that lasts multiple days, dinner can match breakfast and lunch. An endurance athlete's nutrition is similar pre-competition wise, but changes significantly in competition because CrossFit competitors are trying to snack essentially with in between workouts, whereas an endurance athlete is trying to work out for a 2-hour span or so, depending on the event. As I stated before, for a CrossFitter, in-competition nutrition is based on replenishing calories. The quality of calories is not a big focus because the glycogen storages should already be tapped out enough for that day's competition. Typically, what I eat during competitions are small snacks, anywhere from protein bars to ham and cheese sandwiches to fruit, just something to hold me over for the next event. I don't want to overload my body with a bunch of calories and to upset my stomach before going out to compete. That way I don't, waste the calories I just ate. Endurance athletes are now involved in an equation that includes the athlete's intensity levels, duration of the event, and a bunch of other factors. Helms describes all that we need, or all that we have learned about energy consumption according to the duration of the event. So depending on how long the event is, depending on the athlete, that equation is now put into place so that they can maximize their glycogen storages. Post-competition for both athletes is the same. It is recommended to have a 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 carbohydrate to protein ratio in order to replenish the glycogen storages, Helms says. So typically for a CrossFitter, after competition is a overload of all the macronutrients. Big foods, superfoods, healthy foods are probably out of the picture, and it's just the sheer amount of how many calories can the person eat after competition. Anywhere from cheeseburgers to pizza to I don't know, God knows. But the amount of calories a person eats is just trying to minimize the caloric deficit from competition. And then along with also the food, working out after competition or getting back into the training phase is sort of a upward slope. Typically we take a deload week, which means we take back the volume and the intensity from the competition and sort of re-ramp up the intensity and volume before the next competition or before the next training cycle. And then we get to reevaluate our nutrition and see how the nutrition pre-competition affected our in-competition phase, and if it needs to be changed, then it is changed according to that and how we feel, how we felt before each workout, after each workout, during each workout. Sort of the same way we analyze competition at a macro level, we like to do it at a micro level as well. Real writes an article called Individualized Dietary Strategies for Olympic Combat Sports, Acute Weight Loss Recovery, and Competition Nutrition that is directed toward the everyday athlete. In training to become a trainer, the CrossFit Level 1 seminar focuses on CrossFit's sickness, wellness, and fitness continuum. The principle for this continuum is based on limiting carbohydrate intake while beginning to exercise in order to go from sickness to wellness. Continuing on this healthy path, increasing exercise, and dialing in nutrition, one could then possibly go from wellness to fitness, which is the ultimate goal. There are many factors that go into this equation. Some of them are blood pressure, body fat, muscle mass, and triglycerides, as well as glycated hemoglobin, or red blood cell protein molecules bound to the glucose, in excess of which is a marker for type 2 diabetes, which is induced by the human itself. The correlation with the off the carbs and off the couch principle is that people with chronic disease are spending loads of time on the couch, all the while eating an abundance of carbohydrates while not exercising. We see many people suffer from this catastrophe because there is not a positive influence on exercise or body image or nutrition itself, and they see fit as is. So the goal for them is to, one, obviously get them off the couch into a gym of some sort, and then eventually eating properly. Now, like I said before, exercise and nutrition go hand in hand, and without one or the other, it does not work. So you can exercise all you want, but if we're not properly eating, then the goals will not be met. I have a friend in the gym who always says that I work out so I can eat whatever I want. Now, that's great if that's your goal, but if we have a goal of losing weight, then that principle is not going to last. In summary, there are correlations between the competitor and the normal person. Nutrition is at the forefront of health and wellness and is becoming a popular, debatable topic to see what exactly works and what doesn't work. Now, it's not an exact science, but more and more research is coming through to make it closer to an exact science. For any single person, nutrition is the basis for one's health, while for the competitor, it is the basis for performance. Understanding nutrition, hydration, and one's own body is vital to eliminating chronic disease. It is vital to everyday life. Without an understanding of nutrition, we begin to introduce negative effects that may or may not be reversible.